Hi friends, welcome back to Building in a Small Town. My guest today is Susan Frantz, the owner and head brewer at Fenceline Beer Lab in Huxley, Iowa. Fenceline Beer Lab is a nano brewery and they want you to meet your neighbor at your fence line. They have a rotating lineup of beers brewed in-house and some phenomenal eats that incorporate those beers and the spent grains used to make them. I 10 out of 10 recommend their sourdough pretzels with the mustard sauce. You absolutely will not regret ordering them. This episode was a first, as it required a pause for an unexpected equipment delivery. Not gonna lie, the whole thing threw me off my game a bit, and you'll hear why when you hear the story of how it all went down, but opened a cool conversation about being underestimated as a woman. I really enjoyed this conversation. If you're in Central Iowa, please make sure you stop in and give Fenceline a try. Seriously, you will not regret it. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for listening and ask you to make sure that you're subscribed on whatever your listening platform of choice. While you're at it, if you could also drop a quick rating and review, that's a simple, free way to support the show, and it helps others find the show. Thank you again, and let's get into it. Welcome to Building in a Small Town, where we're talking to entrepreneurs, community leaders, policymakers, and more to find out how they're building things in small towns. I'm your host, Shelby Smith. Originally from Huxley?
No.
Where are you originally from?
That's quite a long story.
Good.
But it's
we
okay.
got time.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My husband, Jonathan, grew up in mostly Greensboro, North Carolina. He moved around a lot in high school. And then we met first day of school at Virginia Tech. We both graduated from there. He in biochemistry and me in architecture. And
you met in the first day in a class?
In a class.
What class were those two majors sharing, I guess is my point.
Neither one of us started in what we graduated in.
Okay.
I was closer than he was. We both started in landscape architecture.
Okay.
And then I switched to regular architecture and he switched to biochemistry. Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure how that transition happened, but I'm glad it did. And then we started what I call our collegiate tour of the country. He got his master's at Purdue, PhD at Utah State.
All in biochemistry?
He moved, so master's and PhD are in ag.
Okay.
So plant physiology mostly.
More specialized at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then first job out of college was on the University of Toledo's campus in Ohio with the USDA. And then we had a brief stint up in Maine with the USDA. That lab got shut down and they relocated everybody throughout the country and they relocated us back to Toledo, which was ultimately fortuitous. We hadn't sold our house at that point. So we just moved right back in. Our son went right back into school. We were there maybe a year and a half and he was recruited by Corteva to move to Iowa.
Okay.
So we moved into Ankeny. Our son was in middle school at the time. And then we started thinking about doing something with the brewery.
Okay. So was it Corteva at that point?
No.
I was going to say. That's a relatively recent rebrand.
Yeah, we've been here 12 years. It was, I think it was beyond Pioneer at that point. I think it might have been DuPont Pioneer, but before Dow DuPont Pioneer. So
it's hard to keep all of that.
It
went through a lot in that decade or so.
Oh yeah,
like so much.
I still tell people he works for Pioneer because it's like they know what that is,
right?
Even though it's just the seed brand anymore, but yeah,
it's
like
easier.
Corteva, what's that?
Yeah, it's easier to explain, especially if you've been in Iowa for a long time.
Yeah,
you're more familiar with. Not that whatever.
Yep.
Yes, totally agree. Okay, so he's doing the plant biology thing, obviously. What are you doing at that time? Are you working? Are you stay-at-home mom in it? Like, what are you doing?
Nope. Well, sort of stay-at-home mom in it. I was a graphic and web designer, and so I was able to do that out of my house. So I was there for our son as he was growing up, shuttling to school and activities and all that jazz.
Yeah.
So it was. So again, my degree was in architecture, and I worked in a firm in Indiana when Jonathan was at Purdue. But when we moved out to Utah, I couldn't find a job in the industry.
Interesting.
For a variety of reasons that we don't need to go into. But it was, I just got a job. You know, I worked at a Michael's frame shop, and then Jonathan's advisor hired me to run his small electronics company. They made light sensors and temperature sensors for plant growth.
Okay.
And so I took that over, learned how to make all the things that we sold, calibrate them, and then I did everything from teach myself how to make a website, because this was 1998, 99.
You mean there's no Squarespace or?
No. I taught myself old school HTML code and built their first website. And, but I did everything there. But again, that got me the background in web design. Graphic design was a natural shift for me since architecture. So then when we moved to Toledo, I was like, well, I'll just keep doing that. That works. So 15 years later.
So were you freelancing then at that point, like Toledo?
Yeah.
And so what were you doing to find clients? Was it just word of mouth purely?
It was 100% word of mouth.
Okay.
2 doors down from us, actually. I guess I have to blame my son, Henry. When we moved to Toledo, he was 3. A boy 2 doors down was 4.5, 5, and they became friends. And his mom was a communications director for a legal aid in Toledo, and she's like, we need help. I was like, great. And so I did all of their graphics, brochures, website, whole nine. So I just kind of got thrown into that. And when I had other time, I got some other clients as well, but it was primarily that for the time that we were there.
Yeah, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And the beautiful thing about, graphic design and website design and all of that stuff is you are relatively location agnostic. Like, you can do it from anywhere. Right. It's not as if you move away from Toledo, you can't work with that client anymore.
Right. And I did. So when we were in Maine, I still had that client and a couple others. And then even, I guess I had a few years still when we were in Ankeny that I was still working for legal aid. I slowly got out of that as we slowly got into Fenceline.
Yeah, so into other things. Shall we say.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite place to live along that tour?
Maine.
Was it?
Yeah.
Why? What about
sure.
it? I like Maine. It's beautiful.
It was a slower pace. It was gorgeous. And we were renting a house on 20 acres on a lake.
Oh.
I mean, you almost can't beat that, right? So,
right.
We were only there for 9 months.
As those things tend to go, your favorite place, you never end up assigned there for long. Huh. Right. Yeah, I like Maine. Maine's beautiful. Maybe it's a little cold. Winters are a little harsh, perhaps.
I wouldn't put it as harsh as here. It's not as cold.
Yeah, I suppose the ocean helps.
We
slightly.
didn't get the -30s. Yeah. We did over the winter have 10 feet of snow in our yard.
Right. I was gonna say snow is a lot.
But you just, I don't know. That was easier to deal with, I feel like, than the cold sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, your face didn't freeze off as much. But
yeah, the perks of the Midwest,
right?
Yeah. Okay, so then you guys moved to Ankeny 12 years ago.
Yep.
And at that point, you're still in the graphic design space. Your husband's now at Corteva in a new role, likes it. At what point do you start being like, I'm going to give this like beer brewing thing a whirl?
Yeah, it was something that had always been in the back of our heads. So in biochemistry in undergrad, they had homebrew club. Because as I like to say, when you're 18 and 19, you can't buy beer, but you can buy the ingredients for beer.
You can make it. That's a little loophole there.
Yeah.
Kind of.
You can't drink it, of course.
Yes, and nobody is condoning that.
No, of course not. Different times.
Yes.
Sure, we'll go with that. So he started homebrewing. He taught me. And then it just became something that we really enjoyed doing together.
Okay.
And so, living in so many different places, we traveled extensively. So we were always kind of gathering parts in our head for something future, maybe. And then when we got to Ankeny, Henry at the time was math. Well, he was middle school. And so as we progressed in Ankeny, he got older, graduated high school. And, it's like, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? I'm not needed at home. He can drive. He can do his own thing.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? So I was like, well, if there's any time to do it, we got to do it now. Because if not, we're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started looking around at small towns. Ankeny, we felt, was full. At the time, there were 3 breweries.
Mm-hmm. And when, what year-ish was this? Do you remember?
So we bought the building at the end of 2017.
Okay. So you would have been looking for maybe a year before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe starting this search in 2015, 2016-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really kicked off, and I should have looked this up. It was probably, I think it might have been 2014 when Fire Trucker opened.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lived under 3 miles from Fire Trucker. We were there for their soft opens, and just the vibe of that place and how they were approaching a new brewery excited us.
What about it? What can you say?
Well, I think it was just the whole combination of what they were doing. Beer is art is their slogan. They had different nooks and places to sit, and you could be a part of the group. You could go off and be by yourself. You could sit at the bar. You could be on the patio. It was a varied place to be. The beer was good. Right next to a bike trail. They invited artists to come in and put art on their wall. Just kind of every little thing, they did something with it.
Right.
And so we were sitting there in the soft open, and we're like, maybe we could do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of sparked our interest, and we had a lot of planning sessions there.
Right.
Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. Just doing market research.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
will. It's all a
Of
write
course.
off at that point. It's market research.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at it anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. So Fire Trucker opens, you're getting the vibe. You're like, oh, this is really interesting. At this point, what's the largest batch of beer that you have brewed at your in-home setup?
At that point, 5 gallons.
Okay.
Shortly after they opened, maybe a year, so that would have been 15, maybe 16. Doesn't matter. Somewhere in there, I got a 15-gallon system for my birthday, and so that basically a half barrel. So that was the largest we had brewed before going down
the path.
The path.
Okay, and so. At that point, are you thinking, going from 5 to 15 to how much is in a barrel? 30?
31 in a barrel.
Okay.
And so we're 3.5 barrels.
Okay. So at that point, are you thinking, that's going to be an easy transition? It can't be that hard. It's just.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if we thought about that at all.
At all.
I did try to get into the industry, by applying for some brewing jobs. I obviously did not get any of those. So I wanted more knowledge. I wasn't able to get it in the conventional way.
And you said, forget it. We'll just try it.
Yeah.
We'll just try it. Okay. So start hunting for a building.
Yep.
You're looking at all these little towns. Did you have like a certain mile radius that you wanted to stay within Ankeny? Like what was on your list of desirables as you looked at and assessed?
Well, location, right? It was, we wanted to be near a town. There's some rule of thumb now for breweries in particular that is like 15-minute drive from, I should have looked this up too. 15-minute drive within 150,000 people or 50,000 people. I don't know. Doesn't matter. There's some
population pocket, essentially.
That people aren't going to drive longer than that to go get a beer.
Sure.
And so knew we needed to be in a town and not just out in the middle of the woods or whatever.
As fun as that would be, though.
I know, right? There is an excellent brewery in Illinois that is in the middle of the woods, and it's phenomenal. But anyway, so you can do it. You just have to, I don't know. So we knew a proximity to large populations. So Huxley is halfway between Ames and Ankeny, and that had immense appeal. And then the second caveat, we knew we needed to be next to a bike path. And the Heart of Iowa Nature Trail is a half a block south, and that just worked out perfectly. When we bought the building in 2017, not much of it was paved. And so we were like, all right, someday this could be really good, but at least we have the start. And now it is paved all the way from Slater to Cambridge, a little bit beyond. It's going to get paved all the way to Collins.
But supposedly it's going to be done by winter this year.
Yeah.
It's all closed down for them to move the trees and all the stuff. Yep. We'll see. Yeah. I feels like an ambitious timeline for it all to be paved by winter. Yeah. But, worst case, middle of next year, I would say. Yeah. So, yes. Okay. So, bike trail, proximity to people.
Yep.
Was there anything else? Was it obviously affordability of the real estate, perhaps. Yeah. Availability of real estate, perhaps.
Yep.
Okay, so you finally, where was Huxley the only one? Like, did you have a top 3? Like, did you end up narrowing it down and then eventually the Huxley thing happened, or?
I get asked that a lot, and I have not figured out the answer to it really, because I can't imagine being any other place at this point.
Yeah.
But I think we maybe looked at one other building, but I can't even tell you what town it was in. There were 2 options in Huxley at the time, and we debated. I'm glad we went the way we did. But, I mean, we were open, and I think there was a lot of, property searching on the internet. And so then it just becomes a I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but I don't have a good recollection of anything outside Huxley anymore. So.
Yeah. It was all just a blur at that point.
Yeah.
It was totally a blur.
Yep.
Too many.
That's the word I couldn't
think
of. Blur.
It's fine. It's fine. It's early on a Tuesday morning.
Yep.
Sometimes words are hard.
Words are always hard.
Very true. Okay, so you buy this building in Huxley in 2017. Mm-hmm. Is this early 2017?
It was after Thanksgiving.
Okay, so late 2017, basically 2018.
Pretty much.
At that point, talk to me, like, what was the condition of this building? What was the plan? Did we have a plan?
It's fascinating. I with my degree in architecture, Jonathan was the one to walk into the building and be like, all right, this is where the brewery's going. This is where the kitchen's going. Because food was always important to us. We knew we had to have food. And he was like, I love all the little nooks. He's like, this could be a cool game room. And he just had it all. And I was like, well, can't the brewery be over here? And he's like, nope. It's like, okay. It had been in operation right up until us taking over it.
Oh.
It was Bloomster's, kind of a home decor shop with a florist shop inside. So it was fully functional as a store. it wasn't really fully functional as a building. There were some interesting decisions made or not made when we were in demolition. The biggest thing that we found, I guess there were two big things. The florist shop area had a walk-in cooler for the flowers. There was no ventilation and no like dehumidifying, and so all the walls were rotted, and it was drywall for some reason, and it had also rotted the floor, and so the only thing holding the floor together outside the walk-in cooler was carpet. So Jonathan put a ladder up, and the ladder went through the floor to the basement, as it happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
You don't know anything about that, do you?
Nothing whatsoever.
So we had to remove that first get the cooler out, then take the floor out and sister up the joists down below and whole nine.
So fun.
Yeah, that was fun. The back wall that had railroad ties on grade as their foundation, that was fun.
Quote unquote foundation.
Yeah. So yeah, you could put your arm right through it. So we had to replace that entire wall. So yeah, and we didn't do that wall ourselves. We had that done. But we were doing most everything nights and weekends while we were still working full-time jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that was a lot.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so you start that renovation in, oh gosh, there's a fly that won't leave me alone. You start that renovation in early 2018, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I was trying to figure out who's at the door. It's just Johnny. We'll talk later. As one of our employees lives up the street.
Oh, okay.
So.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so you started in early 2018.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take you to get to a point where it even starts looking like it's coming together?
Well, previously the entire building I mentioned was Bloomster's. There was one pocket of it that was an apartment, and we actually turned the apartment plus a little bit into Stolly Suites.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked on that as hard as we could for 2018 to get her up and running. And I think she officially moved in October of 18, but her grand open was in January of 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get that part done, you get that rented out, that at least is a little bit of cash flow to help stop the bleeding from other perspectives.
And then it was just chip away at everything else. We would order stacks that were taller than I was of drywall, and just, all right, this is our life for the next however many weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The demo on our side took at least a year, but we're also trying to finish up her on the other side. So it was a weird combination of, we're still like tearing things out, and I'm also laying tile next door. So it was a weird way forward, but I can't imagine that not being that way either. That's how it needed to be.
Yeah. And so while you're doing all of this build out, demo, finishing the Stally Suite side, are you still brewing? Like, what are you doing on that piece?
We weren't brewing as much at home. Just we were so tired.
Yeah.
So that slowed down a little bit. Not entirely, but yeah.
Which makes sense. Like, it's one of those things.
Right.
You can't do all the things at all times.
Yeah.
And had you, at that point, did you already have in your head how many beers that you wanted to offer?
Yes. And so we knew we were going to buy a 12-tap dispenser system. But one of our concepts was, the full name of our brewery is Fenceline Beer Lab. We wanted to be experimental. We wanted to offer options on things. We wanted people to explore with their palates. And so our brew system, 3.5 barrels, is the size batch we make, but we can split it in fermentation 3 ways. And so we can treat those beers differently in fermentation and provide an entirely different exploration. For example, right now we've got 2 out of 3 of a series are on tap of a Saison. One is a mango and jasmine Saison, and the other is a chipotle and poblano pepper Saison. So same base, but entirely different beers.
Sure.
When you're drinking them. So 12 taps. Sometimes you'll have 3 all of a very similar base anyway. So as we progressed, we have learned that it's difficult to get all 3 on at the same time. But we've also kind of identified 6 beers plus or minus that will always be on tap. So we always have our lightest Picket Cream Ale, our Blessing Mimosa Blonde, Handy Andy Stout, because that shows up in a lot of our food as well. And it's always nice to have a stout on. Some people say they can't drink it in the summer, but they're crazy.
They're wrong.
They're wrong. And then we had our Burn the Boats Brown, Honey Truncheon, and then a double, and our Outstanding. I think that's probably more than 6 if I actually counted it up. But at any given time, one of them will fall off usually. And then we fill it in with fun
experiments.
Stuff. Yeah, experiments.
Okay, so you get Stally Sweets up and running by late 2018, early 2019. You're still demoing your stuff, putting on finishing touches, all of that. Yep. At what point do you get everything put together, ready to do our grand opening? Fenceline Beer Lab is operational. We've arrived.
Our first soft open was November 14th of 2019. That was when we had our last food inspection. And it was, I don't know what we expected, but it was almost like we weren't prepared. Like, we knew the inspection was coming. We prepared for it. Everything was ready to go. And I hadn't bought a POS system yet. Because John was like, we passed. Let's open. I was like, I can't
don't know how to take money.
How do I take money? I was like, oh. So it was 10 in the morning, I think. And I went up to Sam's and bought a square reader and came back, plugged in the few things I knew I needed, and we opened the doors at like 5 o'clock and just put a sign up and said, come try beer. So we did a few of those in November and December. December 14th or 13th, I think it was, we started with some food because it happened to be National Biscuits and Gravy Day. So our original menu had biscuits and gravy, and it was phenomenal. We bring it back every now and again. And we make our own spent grain biscuits. So using the grain from the brewing process in the biscuits, and they're yummy.
Yeah. So when you opened, how many beers did you have on? Did you have the full 12?
We did not.
Okay. So how many do you remember?
We didn't hit the full 12 until probably late 2020, very late 2020. I think we had maybe 6, and 3 of them were in a split batch. And so it was kind of one, but we were able to offer 3 different things. It was about 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And initial feedback?
Initial feedback was great.
Were you nervous of the initial feedback?
Oh, I'm still nervous of the feedback. I mean, that doesn't go away. Yeah, beer reviews can be frustrating.
Sure.
To say the least.
Like what? From a brewer's perspective, what is one where you see it and you're just like, you don't understand?
Yeah. So Untapped is a beer rating site, and you get a lot of different people to participate in that activity. I'm trying to be as nice as possible. But then you get people who the classic line is 0.25 stars, not my style. So if you don't like a style and you drink it and you rate it, don't rate it because you don't like what you were paying to try. Rate it if it's actually true to style.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that kind of angsty, who's going to put it out there, and, you know.
Yes.
And the rating system's weird too. And I was guilty of it before really getting into Fenceline. I don't rate any beers anymore. I just check them in. And sidebar, I've never checked in any of my own beers. So like, I don't know. And now I feel like I can't start because I don't know. Anyway. I lost my train of thought where I was going with that.
Talking about ratings and reviews.
Oh yeah. So guilty before. I had never given a beer a 5-star rating, which is
critical.
Yes. and you know, unfairly so.
Yeah.
I think now. And some of that probably is, I don't know if I've ever made a 5-star beer. Maybe I have on my scale. Maybe I haven't. And yeah, so it's a weird system, but people use it to find out if they want to go see you. So it's this complicated nervousness of, is it any good? Is it going to get more than 4 stars? Like, so, yeah, I'm always nervous. What if they don't like me?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
and it's something that you made.
Yeah.
You know, you put time, money, effort, blood, sweat, tears, all the things into. Your intention is not to make a bad beer.
Right.
You know, you want people to have a positive experience. Right. That's the idea.
Right.
So that makes sense. It's kind of interesting that now the shoe is on the other foot, that you won't. Right. You won't rate. And it's just one of those things that I think a lot of people just don't have perspective of if they've never been on the other side of it. And I think a day in the life on the other side would be very beneficial for a lot of consumers. Yeah. And I think that's probably true for any business.
1,000%. Like you don't understand it till you're in it.
Right.
And sometimes you don't understand it when you're in it.
Yes. True.
But,
But I can imagine that the craft beer scene and craft beer critics are plenty frustrating.
Right.
So, anyways. Okay, so you guys open late 2019.
Yeah, not ideal. Our grand open was January 3rd of 2020. And I always say at this point in the story, had we not been open that 2.5 months before everything shut down, we probably wouldn't be here. Our community came and supported us all of 2020. We wouldn't be here. Yeah. Whatever we did in 2020, whatever we put out, they came and picked up, and they got us through. So
yeah. So at that point, pre-2020, were you planning on canning?
No, not at all. On March, I think it was March 19th, we ordered our single 1 little canner that sits behind our bar. But that was back ordered, obviously, because everybody was buying one of those at that point for 6 weeks. And so during that time, we would take our kegs of beer out to Brightside in Altoona, and they would can it up for us, and we would bring the cans back and sell it out of the tap room. So it was a lot, but what else were we going to do? Yeah. So that got us through the first 6 weeks. We were only doing beer. Things were so uncertain with how any of the paycheck protection stuff worked that I just laid everybody off and said, go get your unemployment, file that now. And just so they could have something. So no food until the end of May. And then we just started doing 2 different meals as carryout. Just to just to get that going again, just to try something, because people weren't exploring, right? But they could explore once a week with a different food from us.
Right.
So we did that for about a month. And then at the end of June, we were able to open up partially. We still kept the menu very small, and again with the specials. And then, of course, in August, we were shut down for a week for the derecho.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. 2020 was like the gift that just
I know.
kept on giving.
Right.
Yeah, because you probably didn't have power for a week.
Yeah, right.
Good times.
Yeah. So
Good for beer brewing.
No. So there was another neighbor helping neighbor. Our cooling all went out. I was like, I can't dump all this beer. Like I didn't know when power was coming back. So we took kegs out to Fenders in Polk City, and they stored our kegs for us. So yeah, just wherever we could stash them, we did, and saved it all. We lost all of our food, but insurance took care of that pretty much. But
and so I suppose that's one of my questions. If you keep beer cold, how long will it keep?
It depends. Some of it depends on the style.
Okay.
Hoppy beers, IPAs, will lose their punch over time.
Even kept cold?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that generally is true, but IPAs will fail faster than, say, a stout.
And how fast is fat? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it 3 weeks versus 6 weeks? Like, I have no concept on that side. Okay.
Months. Yeah, it's not super fast, but
and so like a batch of that, like a batch of a hoppy IPA, how long does it take from inception to I have beer in my glass?
Okay. So brew day is a full day, and that's where basically the liquid is made, and then it's put in the fermenter, and that can be anywhere from 10 days to 5 weeks. And that depends on style.
Sorry, go back. What is the liquid that goes into the fermenter?
It's called wort.
Okay.
And it is the liquid that's pulled off of the grain after steeping it at a higher temperature for about an hour, and then you boil it. That's where a lot of hops generally are added.
And the grain is wheat and
barley, wheat, oat, triticale. I've been using Kernza lately, which is a lot of fun.
Is Kernza higher protein?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of actual data on it, but
and so what, like, sorry, I'm just really curious on the whole brewing process. So what makes you choose the different grains? Is that depend on what beer
depending
you're
on
making?
the style?
Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, an American wheat is typically up to 50% wheat. There are different varieties of wheat, which will then determine,
Sure,
that grain bill exactly. Our New England IPA is very pale, 2-row barley, a lot of wheat and oat, and that gets it that cloudy makeup.
and so are you sourcing, like, I have no idea. Where do you get the grain for this? Are you sourcing it? Are you sourcing some local stuff? Are you like, is there a friggin' beer making grain
all of the above?
Okay.
So the Kernza actually is very local. It's a neighboring farm. So that's been neat. Most of my grain comes through a supplier. We were using an Iowa supplier there for a while and love them, still do. They no longer carried the main line of grain that I preferred.
Sure.
And so I had to jump to another person.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. So you're putting the liquid into the fermenter, and then you said it can be anywhere from, did you say 3 to 10?
10 days to 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
And what is the 10-day variety versus the 4 weeks?
So the 10-day, I can knock out a batch of our Picket Cream Ale in a reasonably short amount of time. That's our lightest beer. nothing additional happens in fermentation other than just fermenting. So one that would take longer, like our honey truncheon Belgian strong, it's a dark ale, but it's fermented a second time with the addition of honey. And so it's that normal fermentation time, and then we add honey, and so it ferments again, and so it just racks up the time that it takes to get there, because we need to ferment that all out, or else there will be issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very style dependent, and some beers like your IPAs will have dry hops added in fermentation. That tacks on a small amount of time, not as much as honey does, but longer than a picket.
Okay. So you're anywhere from, we'll call it 10 or 11 days to 30 plus days, depending on your variety sort of thing. So the fact that you were able to save those kegs, I'm saying, and put them in the coolers and do all of that, it's not just here's a check, it's here's a check and then see you in 6 weeks with the replenishment of your supply, essentially. Yeah. Good times. Yeah. Thanks to Rachel.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So all of that being said, you survived through 2020.
Yes.
You make it through, you get into 2021.
Yeah.
The one thing I definitely did want to go back to is, because you brought it up a couple times, is the food was super important to you, in the outset.
Right.
You guys did it sort of a unique way. You started working with a chef right off the bat, right?
Yep.
And I think I remember from your 1 Million Cups presentation, like you had an idea of the things that you wanted that you felt were like brewery food. I think the Reuben was one of them.
Yep. So again, in all of our travels and living locations, we would visit brew pubs, and brew pubs primarily because we would always bring our son with us. So it had to be a place that A, invited kids in, and B, had something for him to do other than just watch his parents have beer. So he actually became a connoisseur of root beer. But so at each brew pub, most of them, I would judge them by their Reuben and beers. I don't know. It's one of my favorite things. So I always wanted one on the menu. When we started though, we did biscuit sliders. We wanted something that, wasn't fussy, more than bar food, but not fine dining. We knew we were going to have a lot of cyclists. So, you're not going to ride a bike necessarily a long distance and then sit down to steak and whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe you do. It sounds nice. But we knew it had to be faster and accessible. And we wanted to use beer and spent grain in the food. That was really important because we've been to so many places where the beer is really great and the food is just okay, or the food's really great and the beer could be better, and very few use them together. And that always puzzled us. It's like, it's right there, like put the beer in it, it's right there.
Right.
So that was our main kind of ask of our chef. And so we're like, let's get a biscuit recipe going and work on that first. And so then we did biscuit sliders. We called it When Rachel Met Reuben, because it was kind of half a Reuben and half a Rachel sandwich. And so that was I think that was the first biscuit slider that we debuted. And then we got up to 3 of them. So I like everything in 3s. And so we had 3 different flavors, and that was January of 2020. But when we opened back up with food in June, there was no way we were going to do biscuit sliders because everything was still to go. And imagine 3 different sliders in one box and they all fall apart and it's just this big mess. And so we're like, all right, flatbreads. Sure. Like that makes sense. It's basically a smushed out, spread out sandwich, and that'll go in a box well. So we shifted to spent grain flatbreads, and that's been great.
They're delicious.
Yeah, they're so much fun.
Bring back the Super Dog.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Super Dog flatbread. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And I got my dad hooked on that too. So because I had it one time we were in there, and I told my dad, I said, because he loves pineapple pizza.
Okay.
And so I was like, he's going to be a shoe-in for this. And last time he had it, he was like, that was really good. So,
yeah.
But yes, okay.
That was a fun one.
So you, from the beginning, you want to incorporate the beer into the food.
Yep.
You don't want it to be just traditional fried junky bar food kind of thing. It needs to be a little bit more of an elevated experience, but not so far as fine dining.
Right. Yeah. And not being like stuck up or, like.
Yeah.
Like.
Sometimes the way craft beer can be. A little snotty.
Yeah, a little bit. Sometimes.
You wanted it approachable.
Yeah.
Approachable but elevated.
There you go.
I think is kind of the way that I would describe it.
Yep.
Okay, and so you had your initial menu, you had to shift, pivot, all of the things that, you know, 2020 required of all of us.
Yeah.
And then, but you don't keep your menu static. Like you are...
Correct.
Seems like constantly updating it, constantly shifting it. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, do you have a schedule, at least in your mind, of like every 6 months we're going to do this? Or is it just like a feeling of, hey, this feels stale, like we probably should shift?
It's, as with everything, it's a combination. So when we came back up in 2020, we just did the 2 specials that I talked about. And we rolled with that for a long time. I think all through 2021. And maybe it was 2022. It was like, this is getting difficult because everybody's in again. It's not to go. And we have so many more options. So 2 specials a week got to be a lot. So now we're down to, we still do 1. And that's still fun because you can still explore. We still offer you something different. And we then change out the rest of the menu kind of seasonally. It has worked out to be about quarterly, where we'll get all new flatbread flavors. We'll get new seasonings on our chips and fries. We'll get new soups, new burgers. Just kind of keep things interesting.
Mm-hmm. And that is another thing to note, like your chips and your fries and all that stuff. You guys are like those are from scratch essentially. That's your own.
The seasonings are
okay. I was say the seasonings,
and
it's delicious.
They're fun, yeah.
Yes.
And you can come up with different combinations that, like, oh, that's really cool. Like right now we've got Caribbean jerk seasoning with our Fenceline 20 sauce, which is amazing. I need to figure out how to bottle that. But we wouldn't have ever come up with that combination separately, but together they're awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, we like to keep things interesting and, a good reason to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you never necessarily know what's going to be on the menu.
You do know that Brussels will always be on the menu.
Yes. Your Brussels are a staple. They are quite famous.
Yeah. We, that is actually one of the few sauces that we don't make is the pomegranate molasses sauce that's on it. And I remember it must have been 2021. Chef came to me. He's like, all right, I gotta order another case of this sauce. He's like, I was thinking about taking it off and, not ordering it. And I was like, no,
not an option.
You cannot take Brussels off the menu. That is a non-starter. Like, nope, absolutely not. Get that sauce. So.
And was putting the Brussels sprouts on the menu, was that your, like, whose baby was that? And did you ever expect you guys to be known for Brussels sprouts?
I think it was chefs.
Okay.
And absolutely not. It never occurred to me that an appetizer of Brussels sprouts would be like, oh, Fenceline, don't they have those Brussels sprouts? Yes.
Yes, we do.
We have beer, right?
They also have pretzels that are really good.
Yeah, those are awesome.
They're delicious.
Yeah.
We got those last time too. And your honey mustard sauce or mustard, whatever.
The mustard mayo.
Dipping. Oh,
yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah. And that was another item that was very important for me to have on our menu. You're a brewery. You make pretzels or have pretzels. And so when we originally opened, we had pretzel bites. and those were good. It just got to the point where it was too much for us to do on our own. So we got, it's actually a coworker of Jonathan's, their business. They started a bakery, and we're like, hey, can we give you spent grain and you make us pretzels? And they're like, yeah, we can try. And so we've been doing that for the last 2 years. 3 Bean Bakehouse, by the way.
They're awesome.
They're amazing.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Delicious.
So pretzels was another item that was important to have in our wheel bag or whatever.
Yes, and your options, your offerings,
there you go.
Shall we say?
Yeah.
Yes.
Words.
Okay. So then, question for you, just out of curiosity, is it possible for you to brew in your setup like a non-alcoholic version of any of your stuff?
Yes and no. To do it the best way requires like a non-alcoholic beer.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to do it requires equipment.
Okay.
And we don't have that equipment.
Okay. And the only reason my husband quit drinking, and we love Fenceline.
Yep.
And so that was last time we were there. We asked, we were like, do you have anything non-alcoholic?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we have like cocktails and stuff on the other side. He was like, no, that's not exactly what I meant. And so I didn't know. I didn't know if like a setup like yours, does it require additional equipment?
Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
To remove the alcohol.
Yeah.
There are other ways to do it, but
not
from
do
what
it
I
well.
understand, it's better if you, we are going to start offering cans of non-alcoholic beer.
Cool.
It's on my
your to-do
list.
Yeah. Well, that's
that list.
Yeah, that list that's never seems like it's shrinking, only ever growing.
Yeah.
Even when you take half of it away,
right,
it magically blossoms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and that was, like I said, it was just something that I had in my head to ask you, because the last time we were there, and I was like, I wonder if you can do that, because I think the one that he grabs, is it Confluence that does the Ruthie? Who does Ruthie? Exile. That's who it is.
Yeah.
I knew it was one of those two. So because he'll drink like an Exile non-alcoholic Ruthie, and so I was like, I wonder how easy that is, or difficult, or whatever. And you guys, you're technically a micro brewery.
We are, yes,
or nano. Okay.
And nano, even from. Is that your delivery?
Yeah, that would be my delivery. It's fine. We'll go until they get around to the back. Somebody will call me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also expecting a mud mixer delivery. Well, hold on. We better pause because I just heard him.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. After that brief intermission where the... God, what an experience.
Yes.
Apologies to everyone. We had a mud mixer delivered today. It was supposed to be delivered on Friday, and here we are 5 days after when it was supposed to be delivered, and then the semi-driver yelled that I wasn't capable in the middle of the street.
It's amazing. And I don't know if it's just a woman thing, but being underestimated is just infuriating.
Yes. Well, and I got to imagine you get that a lot, because you are the only female-owned one of the only. One of the only.
Okay. There is a brewery, I think I'm going to get this wrong, Burlington. I don't know. South.
One of the river towns.
Yeah. And I love it. And I'm blanking on the name, but on their Facebook page, it says the youngest woman-owned brewer in Iowa. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I saw a squirrel and did not investigate any further. But so there's her. There's a couple. Deb at Deb's Brewtopia in Elkader, brewer and owner. A handful of brewers, not a lot of lead brewers.
Generally speaking, it's a boys' club.
It is definitely a boys' club.
Okay.
And historically, a white boys' club.
Yeah.
But interestingly, with the underestimating and I have a beer on tap now called I Love That For You. It uses the Pink Boots hop blend. Pink Boots is an international society for women and transgender folks in the fermentation space. So not just beer, but wine, distillery, kombucha, fermented fermented products, cider. And every year the organization puts out a hop blend made by Yakima Chief Hops in Oregon. And it is a fundraiser primarily for the organization to continue education opportunities for their members. I'm actually the chapter co-lead for the Iowa group. But the beer, so it uses the hops. And I was at an event, and it was a brewing event, which is the part that really gets me. And a woman came up to me and said, "Oh, what do you do? What's your role at Fenceline?" And I was like, "I'm the owner and head brewer." She said, "Oh, I love that for you," which I don't think she meant it in the way that I received it. But it can be hard not to receive it that way. And
Right.
that wasn't the first time. Like, it's just still so unexpected. And I think the sentiment was like, great, you know, I love that for you, but I heard it as, oh, I love that for you. Like, that's not possible. So, yeah, that the semi driver was like, questioned your capability to help him move a heavy object is frustrating.
Yes. Well, and for context around that entire, yeah, it's okay. For context around that entire situation, like I said, this mud mixer, this guy shows up. I knew it was coming. With trucking, you never know when it's going to show up. But so I told him to pull back around in the alley in the back by the shop. And he said, "Well, is somebody going to be back there?" I said, "Yeah, me." And he goes, he like gave me a look. I said, and so the words out of my mouth were, "Do you think I'm not capable?" And he said, "No."
Yeah.
So I wanted to take my shoe off and throw it at him, but I didn't. I went to the back, and the mud mixer is now unloaded.
Oh, I love that for you.
Thanks.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. I can imagine, being in a boys club sort of an industry comes at the same time, you know, it's sort of built-in marketing, makes it easier in some ways, because you're like, I'm doing, like, that's something that sets me apart. I don't have to, you know, for better or worse. Yeah. Whatever. We lean into it. Right. But sometimes you still just want to freaking throw your shoe at them. Yeah.
Sometimes it gets tiring to lean so much.
Yes, I hear you. Good times. Yeah. I'm glad somebody else was here to witness that, though, because I don't think I would have been like, maybe I heard that wrong. Maybe he didn't actually say that. You did
not hear that wrong. Nope.
Good times.
Yep.
Anyway. Okay. So, and, you know, talking about 2020, you guys survived through it. You pivoted. You did all the things you had to do. What's the recovery been like since 2020? Do you feel like you're firing on all cylinders yet? Because it seems like you just got started. Yeah. And, you know, then you just get your legs cut out from under you, essentially. Right. And here we are, you know, 4 years post.
Yeah, we're firing on all cylinders, and some cylinders that I didn't know we had. So things are good. Most of 95% or more, I don't know where I got that number from, but of our advertising is word of mouth. And I mean, social media is also word of mouth pretty much. So, so we're growing steadily, at least in our, weekly sales type thing, you know, we're not physically growing.
Not yet anyway.
No. And, you know, there's a couple schools of thought, especially I feel like with breweries, and maybe it's just because I'm so into it. It's probably with everything else too. But, you know, the push to grow, get bigger, more reach doesn't appeal to me. You know, if I had wanted that, I could have stayed in Ankeny and grown there. I want to be small. I want, you know, our tagline is meet your neighbor at your fence line. I want to keep that. I don't want to keep pushing the fence line further away from us, you know. I like being there during our open hours so I can talk to people about the beer, so I can talk to people about the community. I don't think I'd get that bigger and bigger. You lose that familiarity when you know, open up bajillion locations or even a lot of people are like, when are you going to get in Hy-Vee's shelves? And I was like, probably not. Certainly not anytime soon. Getting more kegs out to restaurants would be great. And that frankly is our next kind of obstacle on the brewing side. But
from a capacity standpoint, or what?
Capacity, and just navigating timelines, because we're so small. What does that do to our brew cycle? What does that do to kegging? Do we need more kegs? Do we need more cooler space? Do we need another fermenter? Like, we're kind of at a weird size to do a lot of distribution. So that it just opens up a whole lot more questions.
And a whole lot more logistics. And, that's one of those things that it happens in scaling anything. Like, you hit a point where that first little leg up, I feel like, is one of the hardest in terms of locations. Like, opening the second location seems like it's the most difficult thing. And then after you've done that, it doesn't necessarily get easier.
Right.
But, like, the second one's the hardest always. Yeah. And so it is. Do you have to distribute? You know what I mean? Like, if you...
No. No. But it would certainly help our... oddly, it would help our word of mouth, because, you could...
More exposure.
Yeah, more exposure. And they'd be like, oh, I had that at that one restaurant. Let's go try them in Huxley.
Sure.
So it would help in that regard. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I was going to say, I feel like Jonathan is more interested in the distribution part than I am. And maybe that's true, but I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go into screaming debt, and so trying to navigate that is, I think I tend to be a little bit more conservative in that regard. Not that he's not, but I don't know. I went off on a tangent there in my head.
It's okay. He might be a little less risk averse in some situations. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, you keep
and we balance each other in that regard too. We do say together we make one good brewer. And on a lot of levels. We actually had Nikki Fisher of Ames Chamber and Economic Development. She brought in a group of teachers yesterday into Fenceline. We did a private event lunch for them, and it was interesting because the teachers were asking questions, and one of the questions that both kind of groups on the tour asked was, okay, if one of our students wants to go into this, what do you recommend they study? And it hit me. I was like, well, biochemistry, and then like engineering, because it's a lot of logistics and fixing things and making things, and then understanding how either the chemical biochem side can fail or the built part can fail. And, so together we make one good brewer because, I have the architecture background and the building and and he's got the biochem, and it's like, I hadn't put that together before, which makes me feel stupid, but
yeah.
It's fine. But, on a smaller side, he really likes dark beers and I really like hoppy beers. And so together we like all beers.
Yeah. You have the variety.
Right. So yeah, together we make one good brewer.
Yeah.
So, so it's good that I might be less risk.
Less risk. Yeah.
Prone.
He's more risk seeking.
Yeah.
But probably not even the right description.
Right. Yeah.
Just
exactly.
Yeah. It's a good balance.
Yes.
Everybody
there we go.
Everybody needs the balance.
Yes.
Flavor, beer styles,
Yeah.
all of the things.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's such a teacher question.
Yeah.
What should they study if they would like to go into this? Okay, so the other question I had, do you guys have a lot of seasonality in your business? Like, do you see a major uptick, obviously, with the bike trails being open? Like, is summer a really good season?
Summer is the best.
Okay.
January is the worst.
For everybody.
For everybody. It hits restaurants and breweries harder, I think, than general spending. Because people had been going to parties and going out to dinner and, bringing family in and then spending money and then eating all the things and drinking all the things all December. And then New Year's resolutions hit. And January is tough for restaurants and breweries.
Yeah.
But if it's sunny, it's great. Wind does not help, especially if we're looking for cyclists. Like, they just don't come. Definitely seasonality.
Seasonality and weather, obviously. Day-to-day weather.
Yeah, that's been an interesting part of being in a small town. It's also dependent on activities. How many sports teams does Ballard have? And Iowa State influences us. And vacations. Huxley likes to travel away from Huxley, and that means they're traveling away from us. And so, we'll have pockets where I haven't seen our regulars in like a week. Oh, spring break. Yeah. And so it's, again, it hits harder because we're small, but, in Ankeny, I think there would be less seasonality. You're still going to get, cyclist seasonality and stuff like that. But the smaller you get, the more difficult it is, I guess.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I would say home games versus away game, like all of that stuff.
Yeah. And the time of day that Iowa State plays can make a big difference. If they play like a noon game in Ames, we're going to have a bad day because people are going to go up there, tailgate at 6 a.m, go to the game, and not be able to put any more alcohol in their body after that. Basketball games are better for us because there's not that big of a tailgate vibe. So people come in for dinner before the game. But football's hard. A 4:00 game usually isn't great either because people will tailgate at noon and then we'll be closed. Night games are actually decent because people will come to lunch.
Sure.
And then go tailgate.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I didn't expect it to be that like specific. Like,
I was going to say, it's things you definitely don't think about.
Right.
At all.
Yeah. Prom has been an interesting one because the parents will all come in because they don't have their kids that night. So, just little things like that. And I originally started, pulling all the calendars from all the places. And finally, it's just like, you know what? Just we'll figure it out. Like some things we have to plan for, like big events and stuff like that. But, I can't. There's a volleyball game, every Tuesday and whatever. But I stopped with the calendar a while ago.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
No, it's like you said, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And you can try and plan, and it's just not going to work out that way anyways. So, okay. So as you look forward, is there anything, is there a different kind of beer or something that you're like, I really want to try that. And I really want to put this, something experimental that you haven't done yet.
Yeah.
That's kind of kicking around in the back of your head, like this one.
I don't really have anything specific right now, I guess. Everybody always asks us, do you have any barrel aged stuff? And in April of 2020, I was like, well, we might as well get some barrels, and what else are we going to do? So I ordered 2 barrels. I ordered red wine barrels, and I was super excited. And then with everything else going on, and I also realized how much other things you have to do and buy to be able to do the barrels, and then I got overwhelmed, and I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not, and that's okay. So no, I still don't have any barrel aged stuff, but so now our barrels are sitting on our patio.
I was going to say, are they tables now?
Yeah. Yeah, and one I think is a starling house at the moment, so that's not great. But
Yeah.
they'll be gone
Yeah.
soon, and we'll close that up.
Yeah,
but
it happens.
yeah,
There's a fern I have hanging out front that I can't move, even though it's
Yeah.
not happy there because there's a bird's nest with babies in it at the
Yep.
moment, and
Yep.
I can't bring myself to
right. Yeah.
relocate
No.
just yet.
It'll be all right.
So totally get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then as you look forward to the next 12 months, like, is there something that you are particularly excited about? Like, it can be around Fenceline, it can be life, it can be whatever.
A few things. One on the Fenceline side is we are brewing a beer specifically for Huxley's Prairie Fest. So that's going to be fun. And we're going to send a part of the batch to the state fair to kind of get the word out. Not that Prairie Fest necessarily needs advertising because everybody comes to it anyway, it feels like. But it'd be nice to kind of showcase that and then have it on tap at Prairie Fest.
And Prairie Fest is when?
It is always the first weekend after the first week in school. So I think it's 25th-ish this year.
Of August.
August.
Yeah, it seems like it's the same time as like Lincoln Highway Days in
It is
Nevada.
always. Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't know why they can't figure that out.
That's fine.
Because that would be great. Because
Yeah.
I would like to go to
Lincoln Highway Days.
Lincoln Highway Days, but I never will be able to. So I don't know.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's exciting. The splash pad in Huxley is fully funded. Jonathan and I also started a nonprofit called Friends of Huxley in 2021. Initially, it was kind of, we looked at it as being able to help out with low-hanging fruit for the city and just make Huxley even better. And we adopted the Heart of Iowa Nature Trail for trash cleanup, the section in Huxley. We raised money a lot through Fenceline for the purchase of some water fountains for a couple parks in town. And then we started in earnest helping raise money for the splash pad. It is now fully funded and I think it's out for bid now. And so hopefully, I don't know if they're going to still break ground this year. I really hope so. That would be great. It'd be awesome to have it done by Prairie Fest, but that's maybe just dreaming. So that's exciting in the next 12 months because that'll be done. We've already shifted focus to another project located at Railroad Park. So hopefully we'll get some movement on that. I feel like I'm forgetting something. And this is one of those things that Jonathan, why didn't you mention that? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
A lot of things.
Words
Yeah.
Words hard still, always. Those are the big things right now for us.
Yeah. Okay, so if somebody wants to follow along, get in contact, look you up,
Yep.
where should they go?
They can go just about anywhere on your mobile device. Fencelinebeerlab.com or even just fenceline.beer. All of our social handles are Fenceline Beer. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't want to call it X. Twitter. Yeah.
Awesome.
We do have on our website, you can sign up for email newsletter. I'm not great at sending those out. I've sent out 2 this year, which is more than I sent out the entire last year. But it's something I'd like to focus on. So
It's also on that list.
it is on that list, and it got crossed off twice, but it's still on the list.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing list.
Part of the reason that list can never shrink
That's right.
is probably that.
That's right.
Cool. Is there anything else that you want to leave the people with?
I don't think so.
Don't drink bad beer.
Don't drink bad beer. Support your local small towns.
Mm-hmm.
Support the people in them.
Yeah. If you want nice things, you have to support them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All those things.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time
Of
to
course.
sit down and record this with me.
Yeah,
And
you're welcome. and
if you
thank
guys have not been to Fenceline yet, please go. It's delicious. Flatbreads are beautiful.
Awesome.
Steak frites right
oh,
now
yeah,
are just
right now, yeah.
amazing. And grab a pretzel. You will not regret it.
And
1,000%.
a slice of cheesecake from Stolly Sweets. We always have a different cheesecake from her. I don't think I mentioned that when we were talking about her.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think we got the monster cookie one last time we were
Oh,
there.
yeah.
It's delish.
So good. Oh, currently our hours are Wednesdays through Sundays.
Yeah, you're not open Monday and Tuesday. I tried to go last night on a Monday night to do some market research because we're working on a job in Huxley. And so I was like, oh, perfect. I'll go to Fenceline.
Just go there. Yeah.
Nope.
No. That could be something in the next few months that we adjust. We have a new lead line cook in the kitchen, and that will help us
expand
hours, which would be great. So
cool. And most of the time, you're knocking around. I'm gonna say,
I'll be there.
Okay.
Usually.
So stop in, have a chat.
Say hi.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time.
You're welcome.